The House on Oleander Street. A haunted house horror story. Prologue. The listing. The house sat at the end of Oleander Street like a bad tooth in an otherwise perfect smile. Victorian architecture, 3 stories, wraparound porch, original hardwood floors, stained glass windows. Built in 1887 by a timber baron named Cornelius Marsh. 7 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a ballroom on the 3rd floor that hadn't seen dancers in over a century. Market value, $2.3 million. Listing price, $127,000. There's always a reason when a house is that cheap. My name is Elena Reeves. I'm a house flipper. I buy properties that need work, renovate them, and sell them for profit. I've done 23 houses in the past 6 years. Everything from foundation problems to mold remediation to complete gut renovations. I thought I'd seen it all. I was wrong. The Marsh House, that's what everyone in the town of Ashford called it, never the house on Oleander Street, always the Marsh House, had been on the market for 4 years. 5 different buyers had made offers. 3 made it to closing. 2 actually moved in. None of them stayed longer than 3 months. The realtor, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Bowman, met me at the property with keys and a nervous smile. It was late October, and the maple trees lining the street were shedding leaves in shades of red and gold. Beautiful day. Perfect weather. The kind of autumn afternoon that belonged in a Norman Rockwell painting. The house didn't match the weather. "I'm required to disclose," Patricia said as we stood at the front gate, "that there have been incidents. Nothing legally actionable, but the previous owners reported unusual occurrences." Unusual how? Sounds, smells, doors opening and closing. The typical things people claim in old houses. She forced a laugh. Personally, I think it's just settling. These old Victorians make noise. Plumbing systems from the 1800s, you know. Drafty windows. Reasonable explanations for everything. Has anyone died in the house? Patricia hesitated. Several people. But it's 136 years old. Statistically, that's normal for a property this age. How many is several? Cornelius Marsh died in the library in 1903. His wife, Margaret, died in the master bedroom in 1911. Their daughter, Catherine, died in the house in 1924. There were other deaths over the years, natural causes mostly. 1 suicide in 1967, an accidental death in 1989. She pulled out a disclosure form. It's all documented here. I scanned the list. 9 deaths total. Not unusual for a house this old, as Patricia said. People lived here. People died here. That was how time worked. What kind of unusual occurrences? I asked. The last family reported that their daughter's toys would move on their own. Dolls rearranged in different rooms. That sort of thing. The family before that said they heard footsteps on the 3rd floor even though no one was up there. The first couple who moved in after the last renovation claimed they saw a woman in Victorian-era clothing standing in the ballroom. Patricia shrugged. Ghost stories. Every old house has them. Can I see inside? Of course. Though I should mention, none of the previous buyers completed any renovations. They all left before finishing their projects. So it's not in the best condition. That was an understatement. The front door opened with a sound like a sigh. Hinges that needed oil, wood that had swollen and contracted with decades of weather. The interior smelled of dust and age and something else. Something sweet and slightly rotten, like flowers left too long in a vase. The entry hall was grand, a sweeping staircase with an ornately carved banister, original tile floor in a black and white checkerboard pattern, a crystal chandelier that still had a few unbroken pieces. The wallpaper was peeling in places, revealing older layers beneath, patterns from different decades, different attempts to modernize the space. "The bones are good," I said, running my hand along the wainscoting. "Solid wood, real craftsmanship. This is quality construction. You don't see work like this anymore." "The inspector's report is available if you want to review it," Patricia said. "Foundation is solid. Roof needs replacement. Electrical system needs updating. Plumbing is functional but old. HVAC is non-existent. The house has radiator heating from the original boiler, which technically works but is inefficient." I walked through the first floor. Formal dining room with a fireplace and built-in china cabinet. Kitchen that hadn't been updated since the 1950s. Pink tile, metal cabinets, a massive cast-iron stove. Parlor with bay windows and another fireplace. The library. I stopped in the library doorway. The room was dark despite the afternoon sun. The windows faced north, and thick curtains blocked most of the light. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls. A massive desk sat in the center, mahogany, with carved details that must have taken months to complete. And above the fireplace, a portrait. The portrait showed a man in his 50s, stern-faced, with a kind of beard that was fashionable in the late 1800s. He wore a dark suit and held a book in one hand. His eyes seemed to follow you as you moved. "That's Cornelius Marsh," Patricia said. "The original owner. The portrait's been in the house since it was built. Every owner has tried to remove it, but—" She shrugged. "It's bolted to the wall in a way that makes removal difficult without damaging the plaster. Most people just leave it." I looked at the portrait. Cornelius Marsh looked back. "He died in this room," Patricia added. "At that desk. Heart attack, according to the records. He was working late. His wife found him the next morning." I felt cold suddenly, though the house wasn't any colder than outside. Just a draft, probably. Old houses were full of drafts. "I'll take it," I said. Patricia blinked. "Don't you want to see the second and third floors?" "I've seen enough. The structure is solid, the architecture is salvageable, and at this price, even with a complete renovation, I'll make a profit." I pulled out my phone. "Let's start the paperwork." "Are you sure?" "Because I'm legally required to tell you that every previous buyer has had unusual experiences." "I know. I don't believe in ghosts, Patricia. I believe in old houses with old problems that have rational explanations. I can fix those." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. I'll draw up the offer. But Ms. Reeves, be careful. This house, it doesn't like being changed." I laughed. "Houses don't like or dislike anything. They're wood and stone and plaster. They don't have feelings." "Maybe," Patricia said. "But if that's true, why do I always feel like it's watching me when I'm here?" I didn't have an answer for that. Part 1. The first night. I moved into the Marsh house on November 1st, All Saints' Day, though I didn't think about the significance at the time. I'd spent the week setting up my renovation plan. Structural work first, then systems, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, then cosmetic improvements. 6 months, maybe 8 if I ran into problems. Then list it for $800,000 and pocket the difference. Good plan. Solid plan. The kind of plan I'd executed successfully 23 times before. The moving truck arrived at 9 a.m. with my essentials: air mattress, camping stove, cooler, toolbox, work lights, and enough supplies to live on site during the renovation. I'd learned early in my career that living in the houses I flipped saved money and let me catch problems immediately. Easier to fix a leak when you hear it at 2 a.m. than to discover it 3 weeks later when the ceilings collapsed. The movers were 2 guys from a local company. Young, strong, didn't ask questions. They carried everything inside quickly, efficiently, clearly wanting to leave. When they finished, the older one, maybe 30, with an Ashford High School football jacket, looked at me seriously. "You're really staying here?" he asked. "That's the plan." "Alone?" "Yes." "Why?" He exchanged a look with his partner. "No reason. Just, my grandmother lived on this street. She used to tell us stories about this place. Said it was cursed." "By what?" "She never said exactly. Just that bad things happened here. That the house takes things from people." He shook his head. "Probably just old lady talk. But you know. Be careful." They left quickly after that, the truck rumbling away down Oleander Street, leaving me alone with my new project. I spent the afternoon doing a detailed walkthrough, taking photos, making notes. The first floor needed cosmetic work but was structurally sound. The second floor had 7 bedrooms in various states of decay, water damage in 2, mold in another, but nothing I couldn't fix. The third floor was the worst. The ballroom took up most of the space, and the roof above it had leaked for years, causing significant damage to the floor and ceiling. But underneath the damage, I could see the potential. Hardwood floors that would polish beautifully. Original plaster moldings. Windows that, once restored, would flood the space with light. It would be beautiful when I finished. Worth every hour of work. I set up my air mattress in one of the second-floor bedrooms, the one that seemed driest, with the least damage. The room faced the street, and through the window I could see the maples shedding their leaves, the neat houses of Oleander Street, the normal suburban neighborhood this had once been part of. As the sun set, I heated up canned soup on my camping stove and ate dinner sitting on the floor of the library, reviewing my renovation plans by the light of my work lamp. The portrait of Cornelius Marsh watched me from above the fireplace. In the lamplight, his eyes seemed almost alive. "You don't scare me," I told the portrait. "You're oil paint and canvas. And tomorrow, I'm taking you down and putting you in storage." The house creaked. Old wood settling, I told myself. Nothing unusual. I finished my soup, cleaned up, and headed upstairs to bed around 10 p.m. Tired from the move, ready to sleep, already planning tomorrow's work schedule. That's when I heard it. Music. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A piano, playing something classical. Chopin, maybe, or Liszt. The kind of piece that required skill and practice. It was coming from above me. From the 3rd floor. From the ballroom. I grabbed my flashlight and headed up the stairs. The music got louder as I climbed. Definitely a piano, definitely complex, definitely real and not my imagination. The door to the ballroom was closed. I pushed it open. The music stopped immediately. The ballroom was empty. No piano. I'd seen that during my walkthrough. There was no instrument up here. No people. No sound system. Just dust and water damage and moonlight streaming through the dirty windows. But the air was cold. Much colder than it should be. And it smelled like roses. Fresh roses. Not the rotting flower smell from earlier. Like someone had just brought in a bouquet. I swept my flashlight around the room. Nothing. Empty. "Hello," I called. My voice echoed off the walls. No response. I stood there for a full minute, listening. The house was silent except for the usual creaks and groans of old wood. No music, no roses, just cold air that had no source. Pipes, I said aloud. Sound carries through old pipes. Someone nearby was playing piano. The sound travelled through the plumbing system, and I heard it up here. Acoustic anomaly. Happens all the time in old houses. I believed that. Needed to believe that. I went back downstairs, got into my sleeping bag on the air mattress, and tried to sleep. That's when the footsteps started. Slow, measured, pacing. Back and forth across the ballroom directly above me. The ceiling creaked with each step. Someone was up there. But I'd just been up there. There was no one. I grabbed my flashlight and phone, ready to call the police. But the footsteps stopped before I could dial. Silence settled over the house like a blanket. I waited 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. Old house, I whispered to myself. Old wood. Temperature changes causing expansion and contraction. Perfectly normal. I didn't sleep well that night. Part 2. The portrait. The next morning, I started work at 7 a.m. with artificial determination and 3 cups of coffee. Ignore the weird sounds. Focus on the job. Stay rational. That was my plan. First task. Remove the portrait from the library. I brought in my tools. Pry bar, screwdriver, hammer, flashlight. The portrait was indeed bolted to the wall with heavy-duty mounting hardware that looked original to the house. Brass screws, probably hand-forged, driven deep into the plaster and the brick behind it. "Sorry, Mr. Marsh," I said to the painting, "but you're going into storage. This room needs to be gutted and replastered, and you're in the way." I worked carefully, not wanting to damage the portrait despite the creepy vibes it gave me. Historical value aside, it was probably worth money. Everything from the Victorian era was collectible these days. The first screw came out easily. The second took more effort. The third wouldn't budge. I applied more pressure. The screw turned slightly, then stopped. I tried again. Nothing. "Come on," I muttered, putting my full weight behind it. The screwdriver slipped, gouging a line across the wall, and behind the gouge, something glinted. I pulled away more plaster. Underneath, carved directly into the brick, were symbols. Not decorative, deliberate, arranged in a circle around where the portrait hung. The symbols looked old, possibly older than the house itself. Letters in an alphabet I didn't recognize, or maybe just abstract shapes that resembled letters. But one thing was clear. They formed a protective circle around the portrait. Or they trapped something behind it. I should have stopped then. Should have called an expert, or at least researched what I'd found. But I was committed now. The plaster was damaged. The portrait needed to come down, and I wasn't going to let superstitious nonsense stop me from doing my job. I switched to the pry bar, wedged it behind the mounting bracket, pulled. The bracket broke with a sharp crack that echoed through the house. The portrait tilted forward, and for just a second, just 1 second, I could have sworn Cornelius Marsh's painted eyes moved. Not the optical illusion of eyes following you. Actually moved. Focused on me with an expression that was no longer stern but furious. Then the portrait fell. I caught it before it hit the ground, staggering under its weight. The frame was solid mahogany, heavier than it looked. I leaned it carefully against the wall and stepped back, breathing hard. The space where the portrait had hung was darker than the surrounding wall. Not just dirt or age, actually darker, like the wall itself absorbed light. And the symbols carved into the brick glowed faintly. Not bright, barely visible, but definitely glowing with a pale green phosphorescence that had no natural source. I pulled out my phone to take a picture. The camera wouldn't focus. Every photo came out blurred, no matter how still I held the phone. Like something was interfering with the lens. Electromagnetic field, I said aloud. Old wiring creating interference. That's all. I left the library, closed the door, and decided to start work on the kitchen instead. Sometimes you had to walk away from a problem and come back to it later with fresh eyes. That's when I saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing at the top of the stairs. She wore a white dress, old-fashioned, the kind with a high collar and long sleeves. Her hair was dark, pulled back in a braid. She looked down at me with eyes that were too old for her face. "Hello," I said, my heart hammering. "Are you lost? Do you live nearby?" She didn't answer, just stared. "Do you need help? Are your parents around?" Still nothing. She raised one hand slowly and pointed at the library door. "What about the library?" I asked, climbing the stairs toward her. "Did you want to see the books?" I reached the top step. She was gone. Not walked away. I would have seen that. Not run. I would have heard. Just gone, like she'd never been there. I searched the entire second floor. Every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Nothing. The windows were all closed, the doors locked from the inside. No way for a child to get in or out without me seeing. "Not real," I said firmly. "Stress, lack of sleep, old house atmosphere. I'm imagining things." But I'd seen her. Clearly. As clear as I'd seen the movers yesterday. I went back downstairs. The library door was open. I'd closed it. I was certain I'd closed it. I peered inside. The portrait had moved. It was no longer leaning against the wall where I'd left it. Now it stood propped in the doorway, Cornelius Marsh's face turned toward me, those painted eyes watching, judging. "Someone's messing with me," I said. "This is a prank. Has to be." But who? The movers were gone. Patricia hadn't come back. I was alone in the house. Except I wasn't alone, was I? That's when I heard the whispering. Soft at first, like wind through leaves. But there was no wind. The windows were closed. The whispering grew louder, multiple voices overlapping, speaking words I couldn't quite make out. Coming from everywhere and nowhere. From the walls themselves. And underneath the whispers, that music again. The piano from the ballroom, playing the same complex piece as last night. But now I could hear it clearly. Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor. A piece that required 2 hands and significant skill. A piece being played in an empty room by no one. I ran. Not proud of it, but I ran. Out the front door, down the porch steps, into the yard, into the cold November morning air that felt real and solid and safe. I stood on the lawn, looking back at the house. The Marsh house. Looking at every window, searching for movement, for some rational explanation. And there, in the third-floor ballroom window, I saw her. The little girl. Watching me. Her small hand pressed against the glass. Behind her, barely visible in the shadows, was someone else. A woman in Victorian dress, tall and thin, with a face I couldn't quite see. She put her hand on the little girl's shoulder, and they both turned away from the window together. Then the curtain fell back into place, and they were gone. I should have left then. Should have called Patricia, broken the contract, walked away from the whole thing. But I'd put every dollar I had into buying this house. My entire savings, plus a substantial loan. If I walked away, I'd lose everything. Go bankrupt. Ruin my business. And more than that, I'd spent 6 years proving I could handle any renovation, any problem, any challenge. I wasn't going to let an old house with creepy vibes and probable rational explanations defeat me. "You're not real," I said to the house. "You're wood and stone and old plumbing and my imagination, and I'm going to fix you whether you like it or not." The house was silent, but as I walked back inside, I heard something, so faint I might have imagined it. Laughter. A child's laughter, echoing from somewhere deep inside. Part 3. The History. I spent that afternoon at the Ashford Public Library, researching the Marsh House's history. If something was happening, if ghosts were real, which I still didn't fully believe, then understanding the house's past might help me understand the present. The librarian, a woman in her 60s named Mrs. Chen, brought me a stack of materials: newspaper archives, town records, historical society documents. She looked at me with a mix of pity and concern when I told her which house I'd bought. "You're living there?" she asked. "Renovating it? Alone?" "Yes. Why does everyone keep asking me that?" She hesitated. "Because everyone who's lived there alone has had problems. The families did better, oddly. But single people living in that house? They don't last long." "What kind of problems?" "Accidents, mostly. Nothing you could prove was supernatural, but—" She lowered her voice. 3 years ago, a man named David Forster bought the house. He was going to turn it into a bed and breakfast. He fell down the stairs after 2 weeks. Broke his neck. The investigation said it was accidental. Loose stair runner, he tripped. But his sister swore he'd told her the day before that he'd seen things. Heard things. That he thought something in the house wanted him gone. What things? Ghosts. Specifically, the Marsh family. Mrs. Chen pulled out a folder. "Here. This is everything we have on Cornelius Marsh and his family." I spent the next 3 hours reading. Cornelius Marsh had been a timber baron, one of the men who'd made fortunes cutting down the old-growth forests of the Pacific Northwest. He'd built the house in 1887 as a statement of wealth and power. He married Margaret Thorne in 1889, and they had one daughter, Catherine, born in 1891. The family appeared normal by Victorian standards. Wealthy, respected, involved in the community. But there were hints of something darker in the newspaper accounts. In 1899, the Marshes dismissed their entire household staff, cook, maids, groundskeeper, all of them, after what was described as an unfortunate incident involving the young miss. No details were given, but one dismissed maid gave an interview to the local paper saying the house was unnatural and that bad spirits lived in the walls. In 1903, Cornelius died of a heart attack in his library. The funeral notice described him as a pillar of the community who would be greatly missed. But a small article a week later mentioned that at his wake, held at the house, 3 guests had reported feeling suddenly ill in the library, and 2 fainted. The doctor who examined them could find no cause. Margaret Marsh became increasingly reclusive after her husband's death. She rarely left the house. Neighbors reported seeing lights in the windows at all hours, hearing music playing late at night. In 1911, she was found dead in her bedroom. The official cause was listed as natural causes, but she was only 46. Her obituary mentioned that Catherine, now 20, would inherit the house. Catherine never married. She lived alone in the Marsh house for 13 years after her mother's death. She rarely entertained guests. Several times, neighbors reported screaming coming from the house, but when police investigated, Catherine insisted everything was fine. just nightmares, she'd say. In 1924, Catherine's body was discovered in the ballroom. The newspaper account was sparse. Catherine Marsh, 33, was found deceased in her family home on Oleander Street. Authorities are investigating the circumstances of her death. Services pending. A follow-up article 2 days later added more details. Catherine had died by hanging. No suicide note was found. No explanation given. The house was sold to a distant cousin who tried to live there but left after 6 months, reporting disturbances of an unexplainable nature. After that, the house changed hands regularly. 14 owners in 90 years. Nobody stayed long. The deaths continued sporadically. A heart attack in 1967, though the victim was only 42 and had no history of heart disease. An accidental fall in 1989. The victim swore she'd been pushed, though no one was in the house with her. Another heart attack in 2003, 50-year-old man, found in the library, just like Cornelius Marsh a century before. The most recent death was 5 years ago. A couple who'd bought the house had a daughter who drowned in the bathtub. The parents had only left her alone for a few minutes. She was 6, old enough to bathe herself, but when they returned, they found her submerged, unresponsive. The autopsy revealed water in her lungs, consistent with drowning. But the strange part, the bathtub had been drained. The tub was empty when the parents found her, and the water was still draining from the pipes when emergency services arrived. As if something had pulled her under, held her down, then drained the water away as evidence. The parents moved out immediately. They sued to break their purchase contract, claiming the house was dangerous. The case was settled out of court, and they donated the house to a historical society, who sold it at auction. That's how it ended up on the market for so cheap. It had a reputation now. A documented history of tragedy. I closed the last folder and rubbed my eyes. The library was nearly empty, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows, dust motes dancing in the light. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Mrs. Chen asked, approaching my table. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I found a lot of tragedy, but I still don't have a rational explanation for what I'm experiencing." "Because there isn't one," Mrs. Chen said gently. "Some places are just wrong, Ms. Reeves. Some places have absorbed so much pain and death that they become active, malevolent. And the Marsh house is one of those places. You're saying it's haunted. I'm saying it's dangerous. And you should leave before something happens to you. I can't. I've put everything into buying and renovating this house. I leave now, I'm ruined. Better ruined than dead." She collected the folders. "But I can see you're determined. So let me give you some advice. Don't go into the ballroom at night. That's where Catherine died, and whatever's in that house is strongest there. And don't remove anything that looks like it might be protective. Symbols, objects, anything that seems deliberately placed. The previous owners learned to work around the house's quirks, not against them. Like the portrait. Exactly like the portrait. Cornelius Marsh was obsessed with the occult. Toward the end of his life, he became convinced that he could achieve immortality through certain rituals. Those symbols carved behind the portrait, those were his work. He was trying to bind his soul to the house so he'd never truly die. That's not possible, isn't it? He died in 1903. It's 2023, and people still report seeing him in that house, hearing him, feeling his presence. Mrs. Chen looked at me seriously. What if he succeeded? Part 4. The Rules. I returned to the Marsh house at dusk, armed with new knowledge and a specific plan. Establish boundaries. If the house was genuinely haunted, and I was starting to accept that possibility, then I needed to set rules for coexistence. The portrait was back on the wall. I stood in the library doorway, staring at it. I'd left it propped in the doorway when I fled that morning. Now it was rehung in its original position, bolted back into place with the mounting hardware I'd removed. The screws I'd taken out were on the desk, arranged in a neat line, as if something had found them, reattached them, and wanted me to know it had. "All right," I said to the empty room. "I get it. You want the portrait to stay. Fine. I'll work around it." Silence. "But we need to establish some ground rules. I'm here to renovate this house. Make it beautiful again. I'm not trying to hurt anyone or disturb anyone. I just want to do my job, sell the house, and leave. Can we coexist peacefully for 6 months?" The house creaked. Just normal settling sounds, probably. But I chose to interpret it as acknowledgement. "Rule 1, I continued, feeling ridiculous but committed now. "I won't remove the portrait or damage the symbols behind it. You keep your history. I'll respect it. Rule 2, I won't go into the ballroom at night. I'll work on it during daytime only. Rule 3, you don't hurt me, and I won't try to exorcise or cleanse or do anything to remove you. This is your house. I'm just the temporary contractor." More silence. Then, slowly, one of the books on the shelf slid out an inch. Just enough to be noticeable. I approached carefully. The book was old, leather-bound, with no title on the spine. I pulled it out and opened it. It was a journal. Cornelius Marsh's journal, based on the handwriting and dates. I flipped through pages of dense script, diagrams, symbols similar to the ones behind the portrait. Near the end, one entry was marked with a ribbon. October 31st, 1902. Asterisk, I have completed the ritual. The binding is done. When my body fails, as I know it soon will, I feel my heart weakening daily. My soul will remain, tethered to this house, to the stones and wood I built with my fortune, to the life I created here, asterisk. Asterisk, Margaret thinks I'm mad. Perhaps I am. But I will not go quietly into death's darkness. I will persist. I will watch over my family, my home, my legacy, forever. Asterisk. Asterisk, there is a price, of course. There is always a price. The ritual requires anchors, objects bound to this plane, keeping me here. The portrait serves as the primary anchor. The symbols provide the structure, and the house itself has become the vessel, asterisk. Asterisk, but binding one's soul is not enough. A soul alone is weak, ephemeral. It needs energy to maintain consciousness, to interact with the physical world. And that energy must come from somewhere, asterisk, preferably from the living. The entry ended there. I flipped through the remaining pages. They were blank. "Energy from the living," I said aloud. "That's why people get sick here. Why they feel drained. You're feeding off them." A cold draft moved through the library, though the windows were closed. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds. My breath fogged. "I'm not leaving," I said, though my voice shook slightly. "I made an investment. I'm staying. But you're not feeding off me. I'm not going to be your energy source." Something laughed. Not out loud, in my head. A dry, crackling laugh that tasted like dust and old paper. Asterisk, foolish girl. You think you have a choice? You're in my house now. You eat my food. Well, food prepared in my kitchen. You breathe my air. You sleep under my roof. You're already mine. Asterisk. I'm not yours. I'm my own person. Asterisk, for now. But every hour you spend here, I grow stronger and you grow weaker. Every night you sleep here, I claim a little more of your energy. By the end, you'll be too exhausted to leave even if you want to. Just like all the others. Asterisk. The others left. They got out. Asterisk. Did they? Or did they simply leave their bodies behind while I took what remained? Asterisk. I thought of David Forster, who died falling down the stairs. The woman who drowned her own daughter, or claimed something else had. The heart attack victims, young and healthy until they'd moved into this house. You killed them. Asterisk. I sustained myself. They were weak. They broke easily. But you're stronger than the others. I can feel it. You'll last longer. Provide more energy. You'll be an excellent addition to my collection. Asterisk. Collection. Asterisk. Everyone who dies in this house becomes part of it. Their energy, their essence, absorbed into the walls. Margaret is here. Catherine is here. All the others. They're all here, with me forever. A family that never diminishes, never leaves, never dies. Asterisk. The little girl. The woman at the window. Catherine and Margaret Marsh, trapped here, their souls consumed by Cornelius's endless hunger. I won't let you take me, I said. Asterisk. You already have. Look at your hands. Asterisk. I looked. My hands were shaking. Not fear. Exhaustion. I'd felt fine at the library, energized by research and determination. But now, after 30 minutes in the house, I felt drained. Tired. Like I'd worked a 14-hour day. Asterisk. Sleep well. Elena Reeves. Tomorrow you begin work on the second floor. I'm particularly interested in the master bedroom. It needs significant attention. And while you work, I'll take what I need. Slowly. Carefully. Until there's nothing left of you but another ghost in my collection. Asterisk. The cold lifted. The library returned to normal temperature. The book in my hands fell shut. I stood there, breathing hard, trying to think. I could leave. Pack my things, walk out tonight, never come back. Declare bankruptcy, start over. But Cornelius was right about one thing. I was stubborn. I'd never quit a project in my life. I'd faced down contractors who tried to cheat me, inspectors who wanted bribes, code violations that seemed insurmountable. I'd always found a way through. And I'd find a way through this. You're not taking me, I said to the empty room. I'm not weak. I'm not easy. And I'm going to finish this renovation whether you like it or not. I left the library, closing the door firmly behind me. That night, I didn't sleep in the house. I got a hotel room in town, checked in under a fake name, and spent 8 hours in blessed silence, recovering my strength. Tomorrow, I'd come back. And I'd fight. Because I finally understood. This wasn't just about money or pride anymore. This was survival. Part 5. The Battle. I returned to the Marsh house the next morning armed with more than tools. Salt. Iron nails. Sage bundles. A Bible I'd bought from a church supply store. And information. I'd spent half the night researching protective rituals, banishment methods, ways to fight a bound spirit. Most of it was probably nonsense. But if Cornelius Marsh had bound himself to the house through ritual, maybe ritual could unbind him. The house was quiet when I entered. Too quiet. Like it was waiting. I started with the basics. Salt lines across every threshold, iron nails above every doorway. Old protections, mentioned in dozens of folklore accounts. Would they work? I had no idea. But doing something felt better than doing nothing. "I'm back," I announced to the empty foyer. "And I brought friends." No response. But I felt the temperature drop slightly. Felt that sense of being watched intensify. I went to the library. The portrait was unchanged. Cornelius Marsh staring down with that stern expression. I lit the sage bundle and began walking around the room, letting the smoke drift over everything. By the power of cleansing smoke, I banish negative energy from this place. Any spirit that means harm, any presence that feeds on the living, I command you to leave. The smoke suddenly blew back in my face, choking me. The sage bundle flew from my hand, landing in the cold fireplace where it smouldered and died. Laughter echoed through the room. Cornelius's laughter. Asterisk sage, salt, iron, child's toys. I've been bound to this house for 120 years. Do you truly think such simple methods can remove me? Asterisk. Worth a try, I said, coughing. Asterisk admirable persistence. Foolish, but admirable. I'm almost sorry I have to drain you. Almost. But I'm so very hungry, Elena. It's been 5 years since the last family lived here, and they fled before I could fully feast. I'm weakened. I need your strength. Asterisk. I felt it then, a pulling sensation, like something was tugging at the core of me, trying to draw out my energy, my life force. I stumbled, suddenly dizzy, the room tilting. "No," I gasped. "You don't get to take." Asterisk, don't fight it. Fighting only makes it worse. Let go. Join us. Margaret and Catherine are waiting. You'd like Catherine. She was stubborn too, at first. But eventually she understood. Eventually she accepted her place in our eternal family. Asterisk. Go to hell, I managed. Asterisk, I'm already in hell. This house is hell, and you're trapped here with me. Asterisk. The pulling intensified. I fell to my knees, struggling to breathe. The room darkened at the edges. I was losing consciousness, losing the battle, losing everything. Then I remembered something from the journal, from Cornelius's own words. The ritual requires anchors, objects bound to this plane, keeping me here. The portrait was the primary anchor. The symbols provided structure. But there had to be more. Other objects, other focal points for his binding. I forced myself to stand, stumbled out of the library. The pulling followed me, but I pushed through it, made it to the stairs, started climbing. The master bedroom, where Margaret had died. That would be significant. That would be an anchor. I reached the second floor. The bedroom door was closed. I pushed it open. The room was freezing. Frost covered the windows despite the November sun outside. And standing in the center of the room, solid as if she'd never died, was Margaret Marsh. She wore a Victorian nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. Her face was pale, her eyes dark hollows. She looked at me with an expression that was part pity, part hunger. "He doesn't mean to be cruel," she said in a voice like wind through dead leaves. "He's just so lonely, so afraid. Death terrified him, you see. He couldn't accept it. So he bound himself here, and then he bound me, and then Catherine. We're his family, his collection, his prison. You're trapped," I said. "We're all trapped. Him most of all." He thought he was choosing immortality. Instead, he chose an eternity of hunger and isolation and madness. We're the only company he has. And now he wants you too. I won't let him take me. You can't stop him. No one can. We've watched others try. They all fail eventually. Margaret moved closer. But there is one way. One possibility. If you're strong enough. Tell me. The anchors. There are 3. The portrait in the library. The wedding ring I wore when I died. It's in this room, hidden in the floorboards beneath the bed. And Catherine's music box in the ballroom. Those 3 objects bind us here. Destroy them all, and the binding breaks. We'll be free. And so will you. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired, Margaret whispered. So tired. 112 years of being trapped here, feeling Cornelius feed off my essence, my energy, my soul. I want to rest. Truly rest. And if you can break the binding, we all go free, Cornelius included, though he doesn't deserve it. The pulling sensation intensified. I could feel Cornelius's rage, his awareness that Margaret was helping me. Traitor. Faithless wife. I gave you immortality, and this is how you repay me. You gave me hell, Margaret said calmly, and I'm done with it. She pointed to the bed. Under there. The ring is in a gap between the floorboards. Hurry. He's trying to stop you. I knelt, looked under the bed. The floorboards were old, gapped. I saw something glinting in one of the cracks. I reached in, felt cold metal, pulled it out. A simple gold band, worn smooth by years of wear. Margaret's wedding ring. Destroy it, she urged. Break it. It doesn't need ceremony, just intention. Will it broken, and it will break. I held the ring in my fist, focused all my anger, all my fear, all my determination. I break this anchor. I sever this binding. I free those trapped here. The ring cracked, then shattered, pieces of gold falling through my fingers like sand. Margaret gasped. Her form flickered, becoming translucent. 1 down, 2 to go. The portrait next. It's the strongest anchor. You'll need fire. And the music box. Oh, Catherine's music box. She loved that thing. But it has to burn too. She faded. Not gone, but diminished. Freed partially from Cornelius's binding. The temperature in the room dropped even further. The frost on the windows spread, creating patterns that looked almost like words. Mine. You're mine. You won't escape. I ran. Back down the stairs, to the kitchen. Found matches, lighter fluid. I'd brought them for stripping old paint, but they'd work for this too. Grabbed a bucket, filled it with water in case the fire got out of control. Then back to the library. Cornelius was waiting. Not as a portrait. As a presence. The room was so cold my breath came out in great white clouds. The air felt thick, oppressive, like invisible hands pressing down on me. You will not destroy my portrait. That is the center of my binding. Destroy it, and I lose my strongest connection to this plane. I won't allow it. You don't have a choice, I said, though I was terrified. Your wife has turned against you. Your binding is breaking. You're losing control. Am I? The portrait's eyes glowed. Actually glowed, a sickly green light that filled the room. And from the painting, something emerged. Not Cornelius's ghost. Something worse. The essence of him, concentrated, malevolent. A shadow in the rough shape of a man, but with too many angles, too many edges. A thing of pure hunger and hate. It lunged at me. I dodged, barely. The shadow thing passed through the space I'd occupied, and I felt cold so intense it burned. Felt it trying to latch onto me, to drain me, to pull me into its endless void. I sprayed lighter fluid at the portrait. The canvas hissed where the fluid hit, like it was alive, like it felt pain. Asterisk no. You can't. You mustn't. That portrait is me. Destroy it and I'll, asterisk, cease to exist. I struck a match. Good. I threw the match. The portrait erupted in flames. The fire spread impossibly fast, consuming the canvas, the frame, racing across the wall. The shadow thing screamed, not a sound, but a feeling, a vibration that shook the house's foundations. The carved symbols behind the portrait glowed brighter, trying to contain the fire, trying to preserve the binding. But they were failing. Cracks appeared in the brick. The wall itself was breaking. Please, Cornelius's voice begged, all arrogance gone. Asterisk, please, I don't want to die. I don't want to face what comes after. I'm not ready. I've been here so long, I don't remember how to be anything else. Please. Asterisk. You should have thought of that before you killed people, I said. Before you trapped your own family. Before you became a monster. The portrait collapsed into ash. The shadow thing dissipated. And suddenly the house felt lighter, warmer, like a weight had been lifted. But it wasn't over. 2 anchors destroyed, but 1 remained. The ballroom. Catherine's music box. I climbed to the 3rd floor as the sun set outside. Mrs. Chen's warning echoed in my head. Don't go into the ballroom at night. But I had no choice. Finish it now, or lose my nerve. Finish it now, or Cornelius's binding would rebuild itself overnight. The ballroom door was open. The piano music was playing, that same Chopin piece, but discordant now, wrong, like something was playing it that didn't understand music, only mimicked it. Catherine stood in the center of the room. The little girl I'd seen at the window, but older now, or perhaps showing her true age, the age she'd been when she died. 33. Beautiful and sad and utterly exhausted. You broke Father's portrait, she said. I felt it shatter. He's so angry. But also. She smiled slightly. Also afraid. For the first time in 120 years, he's afraid. Where's the music box? You know where it is. She gestured to the corner of the room. Where I put it the day I died. Where it sat ever since, playing the same song over and over in the dark. I walked to the corner, and there it was, a small wooden box, ornately carved, with a tiny ballerina figure on top. The kind of music box a father might give his daughter. A precious possession. A connection to happier times. An anchor. I was 20 when Mother died, Catherine said quietly. Father changed after that. Became obsessed with death, with binding, with permanence. He said we'd all be together forever. I thought he meant in heaven. I didn't understand he meant here. Trapped. Suffering. Did you really hang yourself? Yes. But not because I was depressed or desperate. She looked at me with those ancient eyes. Because I'd learned Father's rituals. Learned that if I died in this house, especially in this room, which he'd prepared with symbols and bindings, my soul would be trapped here too. And I thought if I was here, I could stop him somehow, weaken him, make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. But it didn't work. No, it made him stronger. 3 souls instead of 1. 3 sources of energy. He's been feeding off Mother and me for a century, and we can't fight him any more. We're too weak, too worn down. She knelt beside the music box. But you can end it. Burn this. Break the last anchor. Free us all. Won't that destroy you too? Yes. But I'm ready for that. More than ready. I want to rest, Elena. I want to stop existing. Whatever comes after, even if it's nothing, it's better than this. I picked up the music box. It was cold to the touch, colder than anything should be. The ballerina spun slowly, and the mechanism inside played the first notes of a lullaby. Don't, Cornelius's voice whispered, weak now but still present. Don't take my daughter from me. She's all I have left. Please. You trapped her here, I said. You made her suffer. You don't get to keep her. She wanted to stay. She chose to die here. She chose to be with me. She chose to stop you, I corrected. She tried to save people from you. And she's been paying for that choice for 100 years. I doused the music box in lighter fluid, lit a match, looked at Catherine one last time. Thank you, she said, for freeing us, for being strong enough to finish what I started. Maybe now Father will learn what death really means. I dropped the match. The music box burned, and as it burned, Catherine faded, not in agony, but in relief. Her form became transparent, then translucent, then simply gone, released. The house shuddered. Every window rattled. The floorboards groaned. And from everywhere and nowhere, Cornelius Marsh screamed. Not rage this time. Terror. Pure existential terror as his binding shattered and death, true death, final death, claimed him at last. The house went quiet. Epilogue. The sale. I finished the renovation in 4 months instead of 6. Turned out, once the ghosts were gone, the house was just a house. An old, damaged house that needed work, sure, but nothing supernatural. Nothing that couldn't be fixed with wood and plaster and paint. The portrait was destroyed, the symbols behind it covered with new drywall. The floorboards in the master bedroom were replaced. The ballroom was completely refinished. New floor, new ceiling, new windows that let in so much light the room felt twice as large. I listed it in March for $850,000. It sold in 2 weeks to a young family with 3 kids who loved the Victorian architecture and didn't care about the history. I told them everything. Legally, I had to. Disclosed the deaths, the previous owner's complaints, the whole sordid history. They listened politely and said they didn't believe in ghosts. And you know what? They were right. The house wasn't haunted anymore. I'd stayed there for another week after burning the music box, just to be sure. No cold spots, no whispers, no footsteps in the night. Just an old house settling, the way old houses do. I made a profit of $340,000 after expenses, enough to buy my next project and start over with a clean slate. But I learned something from the Marsh house. Some buildings absorb the pain of those who lived in them. Some places become prisons for souls that refuse to let go. And sometimes, the only way to fix a house is to break what's binding it to the past. I still drive by sometimes. See the family's kids playing in the yard, their mother tending the garden, their father on the porch with coffee. The house looks good, peaceful, cared for, loved, like it was always meant to be. And sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in whatever project I'm currently working on, I think about Catherine, about her choice to die in that house, trying to stop her father, about her century of suffering, trying to help others escape. I hope she found peace. I hope they all did. Margaret, Catherine, even Cornelius in his way. But mostly, I hope I never find another house like that one, because next time I might not be strong enough to win. The end.